joined here now by Titans head coach Brian Callahan. Sincerely appreciate you taking the time, and thank you for hosting me in this wonderful studio and the building for the last couple of days.
Good to have you.
It's been a fun stretch. We're post-draft now. You guys getting on the field.
Yep.
How does it feel just to kind of see things starting to come together here over the last couple of days?
It's been really fun to be around the team, have the team on the field, get to the coaching part, which is the part that I enjoy. That when you start these jobs, it's just so much work in an office on a desk, and you're in draft meetings, and to be able to finally be on the grass with the players and getting to know them and their strengths and their personalities, and then getting to teach and coach is the part that I love about coaching. To get to do that part finally is exciting. It's been a lot of fun.
I think a lot of people would be surprised what goes into being a head coach, especially in the early stages. It's a lot of logistical work. It's a lot of organizational stuff. What have you spent more time and focus on than people from the outside might expect over the first couple months here?
Yeah, that's probably the best way to put it, is the organization of things. From what's on the walls, what color the paint is, it's everything, and everything needs my input or approval to whatever the process is. And a lot of things that don't have really much to do with football at all. It has more to do with the building and the culture and the people, and where people are supposed to be and when they're supposed to be there, and what does the equipment need and when do they need it, and what is the PR responsibilities, and what do I need to do for them, and how, it's a million different things that have nothing to do with football, and everything to do with the outside building of everything around it. So the football part can be good too, but there's a lot of responsibilities that you just don't really know until you're sitting in the chair. All the things that cross your desk in a given day, which is really fun. It's always exciting.
It's a lot though. I mean, the scale of it and the scope of it, I think it would be surprising to people. You were telling me yesterday that Zac Taylor gave you an insight into what his day-to-day was like a lot when you guys were in Cincinnati. Yeah. What sort of openness did he kind of provide to you there that gave you some insight into what the day-to-day would be of that job specifically?
Yeah, that experience was invaluable, because Zac and I were peers. We were friends on top of being coworkers, and he trusted me and allowed me a lot of access into what he went through on a daily basis, and things that he talked about. He would always mention if something came up, hey, make sure you write this one down, you know.
Kind of getting you ready for what this moment would be like.
What it would look like, and sharing those experiences. And without that, I would have been significantly less prepared for.
It's jarring. I mean, the paint color thing would be jarring if you weren't expecting that as part of the job.
And that is what I've been able to glean from Zac and his experiences, and him being open with me about the process and what goes into being the head coach besides what everyone assumes is just the football part. Prepared me beyond what anything else could have, what any book or like having seen it on a day-to-day basis, and being with Zac for as long as we were together, really, really prepared me. I felt as ready as you could possibly feel, and it's bared out that way. I feel nothing about this early part of this job has felt overwhelming, too much, too busy. It's been very busy, and there's been a ton of work, but it's never felt like more than, I've not been surprised by any of it, I guess is probably the best way to put it.
I think a lot of people from the outside took the aggressiveness you guys had this offseason, the way you spent in free agency, the L'Jarius Sneed trade is another example. It's kind of a sign of confidence in Will Levis and what he can be in year two. When you went back and you watched his rookie year, what did you kind of glob onto when you're trying to find those moments of optimism from what you saw from him?
All of that is true. I mean, we feel like we have added really high-end pieces at positions that we needed it. And we have a team that I think is going to be competitive. And a lot of that has to do with what I saw from Will, what the organization saw from Will in his time as a starter. And the things that you see in Will are the things that you want to see in your quarterback. He's tough. He plays with a ton of passion. It's important to him. He wants to be good. And then you add in the physical part of it, which is he's athletic, he's strong, he can throw it as good as anybody. And you saw the flashes of his ability, all the same things that when he was coming out that got highlighted in the draft as a potential top pick. And for whatever reason, thank God they did. He slides and he's here in Tennessee with me. And I love everything he's about. And I think he's got real talent, and he has a real ability to be a high-level quarterback in the NFL. And those things are the things that I'm excited about.
What aspects of his game specifically, just the way that he plays the position, have you kind of drilled down on? I was like, all right, we can work with this.
Yeah, he's got a big arm, and some of his down the field throws last year were really impressive. He can make every throw you want him to make. What you saw, I think that was encouraging, because I think all quarterbacks go through a period of time where they have to earn their teammates' respect. Like, hey, I can do this. I'm tough enough. I can play the position the way it needs to be played. And he did some kind of wild horse rider stuff out there a little bit. Took a couple big shots, but ultimately, I think that's what endeared him to his teammates and what rallied the team around him. And that comeback game against Miami, the grittiness that he played against Pittsburgh, those things in his first year is really what stood out. And you see that, man, with some more pieces around him, really trying to help put him in position to be successful offensively. If we can get his completion percentage jumped up, be a little more efficient in the passing game, still hit those big shots that he hit, I think he's got a chance to be a really good player.
By the time you guys got to the end in Cincinnati, the offense had kind of become an expression of what Joe liked to do. And that was a process, because it was pretty far removed from what Zac was doing in LA. I mean, there are a lot of elements to it that would have been unrecognizable to somebody who understood Zac's background. Mm-hmm. You guys got to that place because you understood what the players did well, and it was an evolution. Yep. As you try to figure out what the Titans offense is, where does that process start?
Yeah, that's a good question, because ultimately all the good offenses in football are tailored to what their people do well. And that's what the exciting part for me is right now that we're on the field, is now I'm getting to learn what routes do they run well? What ones are they not quite as good at? What routes does Will have a real comfort in? And what routes do we maybe not throw as much of? And that's the process that we go through between now and really all through the season. It's just sort of an ongoing evolution of finding things that guys do well, that he does well, that we can mix and match and make a system out of. And what we did in Cincinnati, we had elite players on the perimeter. Mm-hmm. Elite, between T and Jamar and Tyler. And then you have a quarterback in Joe that was a fantastic processor, maybe the most accurate quarterback in football, and the ability to play incredibly quick. And so we built a lot of the things that we did around that. And then obviously you start to get, what are defenses doing and how are they playing us? And so you had to adapt and evolve in that regard as well, because then we started seeing all this shell and too high, and then we had to attack the field differently versus like in 2021 when Jamar first came in and we were throwing the ball all over the place down the field. Yeah. And nobody's going to let you do that all day. So you have to evolve and adapt as it goes to fit the schemes that you're facing too. And a lot of that was based on the fact that we had a really smart processing quarterback, really accurate, and really high-end receivers on the perimeter that could go win. And we're not Cincinnati here. We're Tennessee, and we have the different skill sets of different players that it's my job to find out where I can put them and how I can use them, and what the quarterback does best so that we can ultimately move the ball and score points.
It was very cool to watch you guys try to solve problems in real time, mm-hmm. because there was an element of, we're the shotgun-based team and we were an inside zone running team. That doesn't really work. And then in 2023, I'll remember the moment. You guys are playing New Orleans and you're in this gun 95% of the time, and then the gap scheme run game kind of rises, and that becomes who you are.
Yep.
And then you go into this year and you see, all right, well, now Joe can't move. So all the play action movement stuff we wanted to do, we can't do that anymore. So you have to sort through that. And then Joe gets hurt and you start to lean into things with Jake that you couldn't do with Joe. So you've gotten a lot of opportunities to try to problem solve in real time. Yeah. And in actuality, that's what coaching is.
I was just going to say that's our job.
Yeah.
And I think that we were really fortunate. We had a great staff in Cincinnati, full of guys that are their first reaction is not why can't we do this? It's what can we get out of what can we do that's going to help us? And that mindset, I think, really helped us be flexible and adaptable and not be married to one thing that, we have to do this because this is what we said we were going to do. And I don't think that's how football works. I think the best teams are the ones that can continually evolve and adapt, and your system might change from what you, in your personal pride, you're like, this is what I believe in. Well, that may be not what you have.
Yeah.
And so our staff was really, really good at pivoting and adjusting and solving problems as opposed to trying to make something, around a square peg fitting a round hole, if you will. And so that's our job right now, is to start that process. And then as we get to know what our team is, we start playing football games, we might have to pivot again. A lot of times in the offseason, you think you're going to be one thing, and you get to the season, and you're like, whoa, that's not what we are. And you have to pivot. And I think that the best coaching staffs in the league do that. And I'm really confident that we got the right people here to think the same way that we did in Cincinnati.
It's funny because Zac's background, he worked with Sean, and I think that's how people would describe him. He's one of the McVay tree guys. But your background is, you're a Peyton Manning guy. I mean, that's the bones of kind of what you believe and where you come from is that. Your quarterback coach, Bo, is Adam Gase. He worked with you in Denver. Yep. Your dad has a really diverse run game. So you guys are pulling from so many different things. And I'm sure the process of distilling all of that into one cohesive vision, that's a challenge, but I'm also sure it's energizing at the same time.
It's a blast because it's, you get exposed to, we were all, most of us on offense were all there together for 5 years, and I thought we did a hell of a job. I think we had a really good coaching staff and a good system. And you get somewhere new, and all of a sudden you have this influx of thoughts of other things. You're like, I like that. Let's do that. and obviously with my dad and his run game, it's like we got all the runs. There's every scheme you can imagine, but they've proven that over his time too, that he's found ways to get the most out of whatever players he's had. And it's a whole different, not totally different, but there's a different style of running game that he brings. And so just bringing those things into our system in Tennessee is going to, I think, what's going to make us unique. What'll make it the Titan system. Whereas, it's, again, I've spent all my time in Cincinnati recently, and so that's where that's what we are. And there's a lot of elements of it that'll be here, but there's also a lot of other things from other really smart people that are on our staff that have a great feel for what works in football too. And so that's fun. The Peyton Manning thing, I think, is accurate. I spent my first 5 years in the NFL mostly under that style of offense, and in the drop back game and the shotgun game, and a quarterback-centric, quarterback-driven system, where some of the systems in the league are schematically driven.
I think it's probably veering away from that, if anything. Yeah. I think most teams have kind of put their quarterbacks in a more rigid structure, where in Cincinnati, you guys drifted into letting Joe kind of dictate how things worked, and that's almost become the exception more than the rule.
Yeah, you have to earn the right to do that.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's hard to just hand the keys over. I mean, you earn over time, earn the ability to go run the show as a starting quarterback, and you play long enough, almost all of them get to that point.
Yeah.
I think guys that you get to 6, 7, 8, 9 years in your career, you've earned the right to do things the way that you like them, because that's usually how it works.
He did. I mean, for him, it was year 2 though. I mean, it happened very quickly, but he's a different sort of animal.
Yeah, and that's just, those are the things that we learned about him pretty quickly, that he could handle all of that.
Yeah.
And that's not for everybody. In a perfect world, they could all handle all that, and you'd be excited about just giving them the keys to the offense. But it takes work to get there, and I think that some guys take to it quicker than others. But it's a really fun way to play football. It's an enjoyable way to have that feedback with the quarterback, and I think that's what we're trying to build here is give Will these opportunities and we'll see what he grows into, and we'll see where he fits. And but we're trying to make an environment where as much as he can handle, we're going to give to him. And I think quarterbacks enjoy that process, and I think a lot of guys grow from that, and they learn, they make mistakes, and they get better every time they go out there, and that part is really cool. But I think it's our Cincinnati time was unique because we did take a lot of things that I did from my past in Indy and integrate them into our offense, and we did a great job of playing to the players that we had. And Joe's sort of in a similar mold that Peyton is in terms of his processing and his quickness and his accuracy. That it's like a lot of these things that we did in Denver fit him. And Mike McCoy, obviously, he took his system to San Diego, and they had quite a bit of success with Phillip, and Shane Steichen was involved with Mike.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of teams that I shouldn't say a lot. There's a handful of teams that have been exposed to that stuff, and obviously Jim Bob Cooter's in Indianapolis, and I was with Jim Bob in Detroit, and so there's some similarities in some of the guys that I've been around, but I don't think there's a lot of us out there that were exposed to that particular system, and there's a lot of things about it that I believe in.
It was a constructive relationship that you had with Joe, and you guys got to an incredible place, but Joe has opinions about how the offense should go and about how the offense should work. What was one maybe sticking point or one healthy debate, let's say, that you remember when you guys were trying to figure out who you wanted to be on that side?
Well, there's 2 stories that I remember that are kind of fun. One was, we kind of transitioned that year into that gun run game and sort of just really leaned into it. I remember after the game, I remember Joe coming and saying, like, we know this is who we are.
Yeah.
This is who we are. This is what I want to be. This is what our offense wants to be. This is what all these guys are like. We came out of the game and it was like, this is it.
I can't remember a light bulb moment like that was so apparent for an NFL team searching for its identity. It was obvious even from the outside.
Yeah, and that was a cool moment. But that was Joe. Joe was the one. Now we felt it too.
Yeah.
But Joe came in the next day and was like, this is us. This is what we need to do. We need more of whatever that was. More of that. And so but that's cool.
Did he have like 2 rushing touchdowns that game? Maybe that was the reason.
That might have been part of it.
Yeah. You want to be a little bit, have a bigger hand in all that.
Yeah. The other moment that I remember, I'll never forget this one, is we came in after, it was early in maybe 21 season, and we had maybe handed the ball off. I think we had a couple of like run, throw on third down,
Mm-hmm.
like trying to like take some heat off, and you're like, oh, we'll run the ball a little bit. And he came in immediately after the game in the locker room, like we won the game. I can't remember what game it was. Gave him a hug, said great job. And he's kind of like standing really close to me, and he goes, it's really hard when we just run the ball twice and you ask me to throw it on third down, right? And I was like, well, thanks for sharing.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah. Thanks for the insight.
And so it's like, but he knew what made him comfortable, and that's when you saw us, we started leaning into a lot more of the early down passing, and those are things that he felt comfortable with, and we weren't a great rushing team at the time, and he just was like, I don't like the way this is. I don't like the way that you guys are calling the game, and it's like, well, okay, we can take that into account. Sure, I appreciate the feedback. And
the fact that he would feel, maybe he would do this with anybody, but the fact that you guys fostered an environment there where there was that level of healthy communication, that seems to be the way to get the most out of your quarterback at the end of the day.
I think that's the way to get the most out of your players. Yeah. And you want an environment where the players have they're not afraid to voice an opinion, and a lot of the times I've found that they're usually right. They're the ones that are playing, and so to be dismissive of what they say, what they see, and their opinions on football, I think that's you're missing an opportunity. And I've always felt like that was one of our strengths, I think, in Cincinnati, is that we had an environment where guys were, hey, did you guys ever think about this, or what about this route, or how can I run it like this? And it's that feedback to me has always been like, well, yeah, let's try it. Like, let's try it. If you think it's going to be good, let's try it. If you have an observation during a game on the sideline, hey, call that again, and I'll get open. They're going to play. I'll be open, and you say, all right, I'm going to call it again. And the same thing with Joe. Before the game, we go through the whole call sheet, and we rank all the situational calls, third downs, red zones, favorite plays early on. We get in the start of the game. What do you like? And I've always found that usually if a quarterback likes a play, they find a way to make it work. And usually when they say, don't call that play, that play's probably not going to work. And so you want an environment where guys are comfortable and confident in telling you their likes and dislikes, and it's not personal. They're not telling you, like, I hate your scheme. They're just saying, I don't like that play.
How do you foster that, though? Because with you guys, you had so much time together in Cincinnati that a comfort just inevitably is going to build over time. Well, how do you instill that from day one?
You have to start that way. You have to start with, I ask Will a lot of questions. And to me, that's how I've, at least from my opinion, that's how I've started it. Ask opinions. And then when they give you an opinion, listen to it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, you can't just dismiss the opinion once you've asked for input. And so it's that give and take of asking questions and listening to responses. And then when they give you a response about something in particular, and you do it, you say, I don't like the way this particular ball handling feels. Can we try it this way? Yeah, let's try it that way. And that's one time. Then it happens again and again, and over time of that happening 5, 6, 7, 8 times, and you go, oh, there is a rapport. They are listening to what
things
I'm saying.
Don't fester. I mean, things are just nipped in the bud very quickly, which I think is the healthiest way to approach that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and if you don't, to me, it's almost like that's any relationship.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know what I mean?
But I think that there have been moments, if you look at the dynamics between coaches and players and how things have changed. Just the makeup and the archetype of NFL head coaches, period.
Yeah.
Younger, I think a little bit more emotionally intelligent. I think that hasn't always been a given with the way that head coaches specifically kind of dictate the way they want the building to feel. But it does feel like we're trending in that direction a little bit.
I think so. I think that's I think that's people. I think there's there was a time and a place maybe over history where, I coach, you play,
you listen,
and you do what I tell you. And then there's a probably an element of like authoritative, militaristic in a sense.
Absolutely.
Like you're taking orders. You're a soldier. You take orders, and I think that's just changed. I think players today, they want to know why. They want to know. They want to have input. They want to feel like their opinions are valued, and I think that's what a healthy working relationship looks like in any field, but in particular in our game where. These guys make a lot of money too, and they feel like they should be able to voice an opinion and have it listened to. And I don't disagree with that. I think that is how it should work. And the days of like being able to just say, "Hey, this is how we're doing it. Be quiet. Do what I say." I just don't think players respond to that anymore for whatever reason. It's just a different generation of players.
But if you're not listening to that, you're probably doing yourself a disservice. So I think trying to be flexible and malleable in how you're teaching it, there's benefit to that.
I agree.
So when you talk about building the call sheet with Joe, you didn't call plays in Cincinnati. Right. This is going to be a new experience for you. So what to you is the biggest kind of bridge that you have to gap, or the biggest gap bridge you have to gap here, biggest bridge you have to cross between building that call sheet and being the one who's actually calling it on game day? What's the biggest difference in those two rules, in your opinion?
Yeah, there is a difference. I'm not going to be dismissive of the difference. There is a difference when you're trying to manage the game as the head coach and call it. I think obviously seeing Zac do it, the process that we went through, which is why I spent a lot of time hiring people on offense that I have a lot of trust in, because I think that's an important part. Nick Holtz obviously is a huge role in helping me get the call sheet set, along with Bo's input with the quarterback. That's sort of how we worked in Cincinnati too, with Zac and me and Dan Pitcher. That circle tends to do a lot of the passing game with it. We had a veteran line coach in Frank Pollock. Obviously, we have my dad here, and I don't think there's many better than him. And so
I think that's fair.
He helps set the run game. He has a lot of the input in how we're going to set it up and call it. And then obviously between me, Bo, and Nick, formulating that process, how we're going to do it doesn't have to be the same as we did in Cincinnati, but how we end up doing it here is going to be a huge help. I'll lean on those guys quite a bit. Just like Zac did with me and Dan in Cincinnati, with everyone has their particular areas of expertise, and I trust those guys, and I'm going to have to. And there might be a time where I say, Nick, what do you like here? And just like Zac would do with me, and I'd give him a play, and he'd call it, and we keep moving. And so there's a collaborative approach to the play calling process, and by the time you get to the game, if you're doing it right, you've sort of set the table.
You've pre-sequenced stuff.
Most of the things are and I think then we're play callers in the league, the great ones, the Shanahans and the McVays and the guys that really separate themselves as play callers, they're great at what happens in game and how to adjust. And I think that's where I'm green. I'm a rookie in that regard when it comes to that part. I've done it as a.
Is there anything you can do in advance that kind of sets you up for success there, or is it just something that's trial and error?
You just try to work through and anticipate and have a plan, and what's the plan? Where do you pivot? What do you think is going to potentially happen? And I thought that was the one thing about like Gary Kubiak with the year I spent with him in Denver was he was probably the most natural play call, like just had a real great feel for when to pivot because he'd been doing it for so long.
Yeah, and in so many different ways.
Seeing so many things, and there is no substitute for the experience, and I'm just gonna have to accumulate some of that over time too. But you do your best to emulate the people you've been around. I think a lot about what Zac and I did together, and I think a lot about the good play callers I've been around and guys that I've studied. But
what does that study look like? Have you actually like gone in and dug into like tendencies and things like that? How granular have you gotten with the research that you've done?
You can get really granular nowadays because there's so much available at your fingertips. But I usually study a handful of those teams every year that are similar to us. I spend a lot of time looking at what Matt does in Green Bay and what Sean does in LA and Kyle in San Francisco. Those guys are all people that I've, even though they're peers, they're guys that I admire and respect and think they do a really good job of setting up their offenses. And I've broken things down by situation. I've done a lot of work on down and distance stuff. When in the game are they calling some of these things? What periods is it early? Is it late? When do they pivot from some of the early stuff, because the adage is all the time, like, you get all the defensive guys go, well, we get all the crazy stuff in the first 15 plays. And then usually everyone settles down and they just kind of run their offense after that. And it's like, well, how do you keep from getting to that point where you do all your stuff that you practice all week and then you just sort of settle back into normal? And the guys that are kind of continually pushing the envelope are the guys that keep calling those things over the course of a game. And so I've tried to study that part too. It's like, how do you keep your edge during the game, you know, formations and motions and how you're deploying your people and how aggressive you are in the shots versus the run game. I mean, there's a lot of things you can look at that can be really informative. But I do try to keep, like, the down and distance thing and where they're calling certain plays and what points of the game is things I like to look at and see if it's things, what I do it the same way.
We're a few days removed from the draft here. You guys took JC Latham 7th overall. When you guys were looking at the offensive tackle group, did you see a gap after him from the other guys who were available? I mean, where did you kind of have them slotted, and with Alton there as well?
Yeah, we felt like that Joe Alton and JC Latham were the two top tackles, guys that we felt really comfortable, that were worthy of the pick at 7, you know, that they were bona fide top 10 talents. Guys that you think they're going to be plug-in starters and play for you for the next 10 years. That's kind of the goal when you're picking in the top 10. And we felt really good about both of those guys. It was a talented class. There was some good players. Talisi Fuaga and Olaf Ashanu and Troy Fontenot, all those guys. Those are all going to be really good players. But we felt like for tackles, those two were the top 2 tackles in the draft, and either one of those guys would be great fits for us if they were there at 7.
What made you feel comfortable about projecting JC over to the left side after where he played most of his time at Alabama?
Just because you can see the athleticism and the traits, you know. He also played left in high school. He's a fantastic athlete, so sometimes that's an easy translation. Guys have done it before. My dad did it with Jedrick Wills.
Yeah.
So same style. So it's not something that you're fully projecting that you've never seen before. It's happened. I mean, Tyron Smith went from the right to the left as well. So it's a transition that we think can be made. And for JC, he's got the requisite skill set to probably make that move and settle in pretty well over there. Also, being that he did play it in high school, and he just kind of got stuck at right tackle at Alabama.
Yeah, circumstances always creep up.
And then they get a 5-star kid that was playing there last year. So the best way for them to play was to have him play the position he was comfortable. He's fully capable of playing left tackle. And you watch a lot of the workout stuff that was done, and when you look at him, it's like, you can make this transition. And not to say that it's not like, oh, this is easy, because it's not easy. But
you can project it. You can pull it off.
His athleticism and skills would tell you that he can make that switch.
At 7, the draft could have gone a bunch of different ways. There could have been multiple high-level receiver options there, along with the tackles. You've been a part of this before. Sure. I remember the Jamar Chase Penei Sewell Wars very well. Yes. You guys end up taking Jamar there. Yep. When you would have weighed kind of those hypotheticals of a receiving option, which you guys could still use, an injection of youth at receiver, and the left tackle, how did that conversation go when you guys were playing out just the hypothetical timelines?
You know, really the same way that it did a couple years ago in Cincinnati, is that you're looking at 2 players, a receiver and a tackle, and you hope that at that plane they're even, and either one of those players is going to be a potential all-pro style player, which obviously Penei and Jamar both ended up. Nobody was going to be wrong there.
No, you guys both did okay.
Yeah, no one's going to be wrong. And so that was what maybe made that one unique, is that you knew that both of those players were going to be very high-level players. And so they're not always going to look like that. It's not always going to look so even.
Where you're actually making a positional decision, not a quality of prospect decision.
Correct. And but there was some good players. You know, you talk about Joe Alt and JC, and then you look at Marvin Harrison Jr., and you look at Neighbors, and you look at Adunze. Like, those guys are all going to be really good players at their respective positions. And so you have to have the conversation of, if this tackle is here and this receiver is here, what do we do? And you talk through the player. There is a need factor that does go into that. And one of the things that you do always factor in is, can you find either one of those positions in the next round? And sometimes you can, and sometimes you can't. But we felt like, for the most part, given their talent at that spot, the receivers and the tackles, that the tackles in this class were going to be that high-end tackle. There's not a whole lot of mystery in where you find tackles.
Yeah. It's top half of the first round.
Like, that's just where you draft them. And so you can find good receivers other places. Not to say that it's a guarantee or that.
But history would tell you that there are more options. I mean, you can count them on one immediately off the top of your head. A.J. Brown was a second-round pick. T.K. Metcalf was a second-round pick. The tackles is just harder. History will tell you it's harder.
And so for us, particularly for us, we just felt like if one of our two top-graded tackles were there at 7, and we felt like they should be with the quarterbacks that are going to get picked, that the tackle was for us in this particular spot and where we're at in year 1, that was the most, the highest position of need with the highest ability to fill it with one of those players.
It helps to have Calvin and DeAndre Hopkins there as well.
That factors in.
I mean, at least have options.
Had we not signed Calvin and we didn't have Hop under contract, that conversation might shift because it's also hard to find impact players. But I think Calvin's an impact receiver. D-Hop's been productive every year of his career. And so for us, it was the fit was a little more natural for a top-end tackle at the top 10.
You guys drafted Devontae Sweat in the second round.
Yeah.
Didn't take a receiver. Obviously, had the DWI a couple weeks before the draft. There were a lot of conversations about what that might do. Yeah. He went pretty high. What made you guys feel comfortable about taking him where you did?
We did our homework. I think that's probably the best way to put it. And we spent time. We had him in on a 30 visit, which was good. It was right after his DUI. So our interactions with him, you could tell he was really trying to make sure that he was open and trying to clear his name, if you will. Like this is what happened. This is how he would tell anybody that would listen about it. And we left the 30 visit and we just felt like we didn't get a real feel for him. We just felt like he was a little bit on the defensive and we didn't,
it was fresh.
Who is he? It was very fresh.
Yeah.
And so we made the decision, and thankfully we have an owner that was gracious enough to let us use her plane to go down there. But a week before the draft, me, Rand, Anthony Robinson, and Tracy Rocker, our D-line coach, jumped on a plane on Friday morning the week before the draft started and flew down to Houston. And we spent the morning with Tavondre and his mom and his grandfather and his brother. They were all sort of there just hanging out. We wanted to make sure that we got a better feel for who he was. And it was really, really beneficial for us because we came away from it getting to meet his mom and seeing him and his mom interact and seeing Tracy interact with Tavondre. And we just felt so much more comfortable with who he was. And I think a lot of times in the draft process, and this isn't a knock on, this is part of the process. It matters. I'm not trying to diminish it. But in the scouting process, scouts go into these schools for 3 and 4 years. And so they know these players over time. And they start to think about, this kid, he was really immature early and he did a lot of things, parties and all that stuff. And so, he was 18, 19 years old. Of course, he's immature. We all are. I mean,
exactly. I wouldn't want my scouting report when I was a freshman in college to be out there.
And so you have to determine what is a real character issue. Is immaturity a character issue? Is an immature kid that likes to go out and have a good time, is that a character issue? Is that something that is a fatal flaw that they're not going to become who they're capable of? And the answer is it depends on the person. And so we wanted to make sure we did all the homework that we could do on Tavondre and really get to know him to feel comfortable with where he was at and what he could look like for us and what we could surround him with to help him get to reach his potential. And, obviously the talent was worth the investigation for us to go make sure that, he's a big, strong, physical interior defensive lineman, and those guys make a lot of money these days.
Yeah.
And so if we could find and feel comfortable with who he was, it's still a risk anytime you do that. But we felt like we did our homework and felt comfortable with the player and ultimately ended up taking him.
And there's also been some issues in just recent history with guys who have weight problems. They get up over 350, up toward 400. Yeah. The production from guys like that, it's been hit or miss. Yeah. But you could also spin it where he's a rare combination of traits, like that size and the way that he can play. So it seems like that's the spin that you guys are trying to, or the take that you guys are trying to put on, is that this is just a rare type of athlete, and that's why we felt comfortable with it.
Yes, and when you look at what he played at versus what he's been before, you didn't see any drop off in his play, and he still did all the same. He could still move the same. There was nothing about his weight that affected his play either. And so, you don't want him to be 380, but there's also a support system in place to help him keep that in check. That's why we have our performance staff. That's why we have a nutritionist. That's why we have Tracy. I think Dennard wakes up every morning at 5 a.m. and texts him, tells him to get up and go work out. And, there's going to be a focus on making sure that we get him started on the right track and develop the right habits and routines to be a really, what we think could be a really high-end interior defensive lineman.
Special. Just the guys that don't come along very often.
Correct.
You sought out Dennard for that defensive coordinator job. You guys didn't know each other personally before this started. The only real exposure you had to him is you played against that Ravens defense twice a year, and it was not fun.
No.
So why Dennard specifically, and why did you seek him out for that role?
One of the things I felt like with the defensive coordinator role that I wanted is I just wanted to explore somebody a system that I knew was hard for an offense. And that's where Dennard came in. And what makes Dennard special is he's got some experiences and some different. He's with Todd Bowles and Greg Williams, and so he's got a different background. And you pair it with back-to-back years and his time in Philly and his time in Baltimore. He's the number one pass defense in football.
Yeah.
And as we all know, the passing game is king right now. And if you can stop it, that is a huge benefit. And so I think Dennard's background with the secondary, with the passing game, how to coach the secondary, the energy that he coaches with, the person. He's a phenomenal person on top of it, and he's a guy that I want to be around. And when I interviewed him, I was like, yeah, this is the guy that I want to work with on a daily basis.
What was it specifically? Was there any insight or element that you particularly attach yourself to?
I think he's got a great vision for what he wants his defense to look like, and he could articulate it. He could explain how he's going to get it there. He could explain what he needs to make the defense the way he wants it, and that to me gave me a ton of confidence that that's the right guy. And he's hungry because he hasn't done. He's been waiting for an opportunity to do it the way that he's always believed in, and he's got really cool experiences even as a relatively young coach in different schemes in the league. And to me, I wanted a scheme that was going to be multiple, that was going to be able to be game plan specific when required. When you have to double people, are you going to double them? Do you teach your coverage structure well enough and have enough ammunition to go play against Joe Burrow and Patrick Mahomes and Trevor Lawrence and C.J. Stroud? Like, can we go?
The answer was
make
yes.
it hard on these guys. And the answer is yes. Dennard fits all of those things, and I think he's a fantastic football coach, and really, really thrilled that we could get him. I mean, we weren't the only place that wanted to hire him.
No, and the fact that he came here, I think, is. I was asking him about it yesterday, and the ability to kind of shape the way that the building felt on defense, I think, was appealing to him.
Yeah.
And when you, obviously, setting culture with players and wanting that communication is one thing. How have you tried to figure out how to coach your coaches now that you're in this role in terms of instilling the type of communication, environment, energy that you want from them?
Yeah, I think the first thing is I wanted to hire really good people. And so that's the starting point. Guys that can one, get along, that know how to relate to each other, that can communicate as a staff and communicate with me, communicate with the other people in the building, the front office. You need good communicators, and you need really, really good teachers. And so that's what I was after. And for me, having to coach, I didn't want to have to coach those things, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Those aren't the things I wanted to have to coach. But you hire those types of people, and you sort of let them do their job. I've hired I got some veteran coaches, guys I've been doing it a long time, and sometimes my job is to get out of the way.
Yeah.
And let them do their job. And so not micromanage the people. And that's one thing I do believe, I don't need to micromanage these guys. I don't need to tell them how to do every little thing. I hired them because they're good at what they do, and sometimes you just got to set them in a direction, let them loose, and let them do that. So that part of it has been fantastic. If and when I have to actually do some coaching and making sure things are the way that I want to make sure they are, that'll come up as it comes. But so far it's been really seamless for our coaching staff because I think of the type of people they all are and the type of teachers they are. There's not a whole lot of coaching that I have to do on them because a lot of them have been doing it for a long time. I mean, Frank Bush has been in the NFL coaching linebackers.
And he and Dennard have known each other for years and years and years. So I think those connection points with him, and then you've known Nick for a very long time. Yes. You worked with Bo a long time ago. So I think that communication is almost built in because there's already a comfort level. And
they even though the defensive guys didn't know me, I'm pretty open about what the expectation is too. Yeah. And so I think it was pretty easy and seamless and comfortable for them. Oh, okay, I can do this in this environment. I'm good. And it's worked out really well so far.
The coach you know the best on the staff is somebody you've known for literally your entire life.
Yeah.
What have you learned about your dad, maybe that you didn't know before, now that you've kind of gotten to see this side of him up close?
That's a good question. I don't know that I've learned anything that I haven't seen before, because I've been around, hanging around for a long time. But he does he's so detailed. And he's got such a really good way with the players. That's the part that I haven't seen, that I'm getting to see now, just how he, day to day, how he is with the players. And one of the things I give my dad a ton of credit for is, he's from a different era of coaching.
I was going to say that. The fact that he can kind of carry that over is very impressive, what we were talking about before.
Yeah, his ability to adapt, how he's adapted his teaching style, how he went from to adapting the technology. He uses all the technology. He might be the biggest analytics nerd that we have. I mean, he understands. I mean, it's just he's just evolved as a coach, and I think.
Where does that manifest? Is it tendencies? Is it what type of analytics are we talking about? First of all, the fact that he knows what it all means. Yeah.
He understands the EPA. He understands some of the run pass things that are like, he understands all of it, and it's just one of those things, because he's just he's done so much football for so long that I think a lot of his experiences in Cleveland, which is a pretty heavy analytics based operation, I think he learned a lot of things there, and I think to his credit, like, he's really open minded about learning those things, and it's just super impressive to me, because at the end of the day, at his core, he is still a old school, nose of the grindstone.
He's an offensive line coach.
That's what he is.
Any other position would be like, I guess I understand this. But the fact that he's an offensive line coach who's been doing this for 3-4 decades, that's what's so impressive about it.
I think, and that's what's been the most impressive to me, having worked with him now. We talk about some of that, but just to see how he operates and how he relates to the players, how he knows how to push and when to love them up and when to back off and when to kind of really put his foot down. Like, he's just got such unique skill set, and to see that in action every day has been the coolest thing for me, because it's been a long time since I've seen that on a daily basis, and it's been fun.
It's cool that you guys have gotten this opportunity to do it. It's a very rare chance.
Yeah, it's incredible. It's we were joking one day. It's like we're making up for lost time.
Yeah.
For all these years of all the hours of work and all the things that he had to miss as a coach, because you just can't. And he's a worker. That's what he does. He works, and he works hard, and he works long, and he's just always been that way. And there's just, over time, you look back, you're like, man, it's a lot of sacrifice for the job, and that's what it requires sometimes if you want to be great at it. And I think he's great at it. But we just, the fact that, like, I can just walk in his office and we can just start BSing about something not even totally related to football. We can have a cup of coffee in the morning. We have an apartment. Our apartments are right across the hall from each other right now. Like, sometimes we drive to work together. There's just something that's as a son, that's really enjoyable about that process. That I have to step back every now and again, and I do, because it does mean something to me, where you can be reflective on that and be like, this is really pretty cool. Yeah. You know what I mean? This is a really unique moment for us. And he's towards the end of his career. I mean, he's coached a long time. He's coached way more years up to this point than he will after it, but I just think that it's just a really unique spot in his career and his life and mine, where it all sort of lined up perfectly, and it's been really a cool experience for me to have. And again, the bonus of it is he's the best line coach in football.
Yeah, that's a nice little downstream effect to be able to enjoy.
But the rest of it has also been pretty phenomenal.
It's a cool opportunity, and it's a cool opportunity overall, and I'm excited to see what you guys do with it. So thank you very much for the time. Appreciate you having me.
You got it. Thanks for coming down.
Absolutely, anytime.